about
fighting for the right to vote.
We're grateful for the opportunity.
2 years ago, Florida voters overwhelmingly approved Amendment 4, restoring voting rights to former felons.
When you sign that paper, you don't feel like you're a convicted felon because you're a part of society now.
But changes to the law and legal roadblocks are leaving many returning citizens in limbo.
So many people take it for granted, this right to vote.
But several celebrities and the former mayor of New York City are pitching in to pay off outstanding fines and fees. With just days until the deadline to register to vote in November's election, we'll hear about the effort to have everyone's voice heard at the voting booth. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to NBC6 Voices, streaming on your Facebook and YouTube pages here on NBC6. Thank you so much for joining us for this all-important discussion. This is an important conversation, and we encourage you to get involved in the conversation. You can add your comments or questions. We will try to get to them. Now, many people with non-violent felony convictions may be waiting on the sidelines because they're unsure about their status and whether or not they can vote or not. And tonight, we are talking about fighting for your rights to vote. Now, no one in Florida has been fighting harder than Desmond Meade. He is voting rights activist and the executive director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. And we're talking about returning citizens fighting for their rights to vote. There's a lot of information you may not know, something I just learned before we even started this broadcast here tonight. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But joining Desmond Meade, we have Dr. Micah Kubik, and he is the executive director of the ACLU of Florida. Thank you both for being here for this all-important conversation.
Hey, Juwan, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure hanging out with you, man.
Amen, brother. I really appreciate it. And Dr. Kubik, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Look forward to it.
You got it. Okay. Well, Desmond, let's start off with you. Okay. Let's talk about what is happening right now as we speak. Are you, as of right now, still registering people? Because the deadline for November's election, of course, is coming up. Are you actively signing up voters with felony convictions? Actively?
Oh, yes. Juwan, let me tell you, one of the things that a lot of people seem to forget is that Amendment 4 cleared the way for 1.4 million Floridians. All right. And we know that during the trial, during the lawsuit, what came out was that about 774,000 individuals have some type of legal financial obligation that they have to satisfy before being able to register to vote. But everybody seems to forget about the remaining 500,000 to 600,000 returning citizens that's out there in our communities that can register to vote right now because they don't have any legal financial obligations as a barrier to being able to vote. And so we are actively out there engaging with returning citizens, and we are registering people to vote. And we're also signing people up if people want to get those fines and fees removed because they're too poor to pay their fines and fees. We believe that no citizen in the state of Florida should be forced to choose between putting food on their kids' table or voting, right? And so we're actively engaged in that, remove those obstacles so that if any American citizen, any of those returning citizens that want to have an opportunity to participate in our democracy, that they're able to do so, and them being poor or unable to pay their fines and fees should not be a barrier.
And that was something that you and I talked about before, the fines and fees. There was some confusion because, hey, there was a bipartisan support for Amendment 4. It passed almost 65%. And then all of a sudden, no. They have to pay their fines and fees before they can vote. You know why? Because there are 1.4 million ex-felons that became eligible to vote. So, hey, we're going to make it a little difficult for you. But guess what? You didn't stop there, Desmond. You got the support and you got the help because we're talking about a $25 million goal that you wanted to reach, correct? To help those ex-felons.
Oh, yes. Let me tell you, I've always said where other people see obstacles, we see opportunities. Listen, we're going to let the legislators legislate. We're going to let the litigators litigate. And we're going to continue to remain keenly focused on the people because we do believe that we should always keep people above partisan politics. right? And so, yes, we sent out a clarion call, particularly after the 11th Circuit issued a hold on the ruling of the lower courts in the Northern District. And that clarion call went far and wide. And I could tell you, not only did we get individuals like LeBron and Michael Jordan and Ariana Grande to join our cause, man, we got the Miami Dolphins, right, that's supporting this, the Miami Heat, the Orlando Magic, players from the Miami Heat and the Dolphins, all supporting this. Over 80,000 people across the country have stood up and became patriots and defenders of democracy, the free to vote here in Florida. And that in itself is exciting.
Okay, now I want to get back to that in just a moment. And I want to talk about some misinformation that was sent out there that you had to correct me on before we even started this show. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But I want to get to Dr. Kubik. I want to talk to you for a minute because, again, there's a lot of confusion there when it comes to money and the fines and everything else. So I have to ask you, what does the law say about how Florida residents with a prior felony conviction can solicit or accept donations in order to pay these fines?
So I think, first of all, we should reiterate the point that Desmond made, which is that there are 500,000 folks probably out there who don't owe one penny, despite the fact that the governor and the legislature have done their best to create a modern day poll tax that stops people from voting unless they pay money. There are still hundreds of thousands of Floridians who are eligible because of Amendment 4, because of the hard work of folks all over this state to get it on the ballot, to pass it, and to say that they believe in the right to vote. And so we should always reiterate that first and foremost. The point about who can pay the fees and fines, there was a lot of discussion last week where the state government decided to try and confuse people again. That's what this is really about, trying to confuse people even more. When they were in court, when they were speaking to the judge in the district court, when they were speaking to the appeals court, the state said very clearly that anyone could pay those fees and fines, that they just want the money, and that in fact, the fact that there were programs for folks to be able to use to have those fees and fines paid for them if they were unable to, the state said that that meant that this whole system was fair and just. We think that's a ridiculous argument. A poll tax is a poll tax is a poll tax. But a few weeks ago, the state thought it was just fine for folks to pitch in. A few weeks ago, the state thought it was great that there were people around this state who were willing to say that the right to vote was that important, that they were willing to contribute to fees and fines funds like the one operated by FRRC. But then as soon as they got wind that some folks were actually doing that, as soon as they realized that people were actually finding ways to overcome these ridiculous obstacles that have been put in the way, they changed their tune real quickly. And that's because it's all about confusion, and it's about stopping people from registering, stopping people from participating. If there's one lesson that we have learned since January 2019, in the months after Amendment 4 was passed, it is that the leadership of the state, the governor, the leadership of the legislature, are willing to do just about anything to make it hard for folks to register, hard to vote, and hard for Amendment 4 to fulfill its promise. And that is a darn good thing.
And would you say that this is a form of voter suppression? I mean, you could go back to the Jim Crow days and some of the voter intimidation tactics that were used, but it's amazing how this keeps on coming up each and every voting cycle.
Yeah.
Would you say that this is a form of that?
I would say this is not only a form of it, but a textbook definition of voter suppression. When you try to confuse people, when you try and create poll taxes, when you try and make it hard as possible, that is the very definition of voter suppression. There's a poem I like that says that every water is the same water, and this is the same water over and over and over and over again.
Amen to that. And Desmond, I want to go back to that misinformation that you had to correct me on. That was something that came out recently talking about billionaire Michael Bloomberg even getting in to help out, that he had basically committed to helping your organization and helping folks pay their fines. And then there was a report that came out that the state wanted to investigate Michael Bloomberg for that. But you're saying that this is all just a tactic and misinformation.
Well, yes, Jawan, at the end of the day, what the state is doing is purely premature. because there's one important fact that people seem to overlook, and that is we have not received one dime from Michael Bloomberg. You know, the money that we've raised for our fines and fees came from over 80,000 people across the country and across the state that wanted to contribute. But I must touch on something that Micah talked about. When we're talking about, you know, that the state fought us tooth and nail, right, to insist that returning citizens pay their fines and fees before they're able to vote. Now, they say they didn't have no problem with them voting as long as they pay their fines and fees. Then when the country steps up and come to their aid to have those fines and fees paid, now all of a sudden they have an issue with that. But it's bigger than that, because it's bigger than just paying fines and fees for people who are too poor to be able to remove those obstacles. What we're talking about, and people are ignoring, is the fact that every clerk of court in the state of Florida is experiencing a budget crisis right now today. Collectively, they're over $60 million in the hole. And if that budget is not taken care of, guess who's going to have to foot the bill? Taxpayers. So right now in Brevard County, there's a $500,000 shortfall. But guess what? We're writing a check to the Brevard County Clerk of Court to cover that shortfall by paying off fines and fees of people who are too poor to pay it. So now what happens to that money? It's the same money that we're looking to infuse and have infused in Dade County, where we've paid over $6 million in fines and fees. Those $6 million are $6 million that the taxpayers do not now have to pay to hold up the courts. The other thing is, those $6 million are going towards victim compensation funds. It's going towards teen court. It's going towards the clerk of court, state attorney office, FDLE, a public defender's office. And so to see the state try to stand in the way, right, of actually addressing budgetary crisis in its own office for the sake of politics is disheartening, right? They would rather have taxpayers have their taxes increase to cover the shortfall from the clerk of court, or will they allow democracy at its finest, when people are standing up and freeing the vote, to actually also take care of the crisis, save taxpayers' dollars, and make sure that victims have some type of fund where they can get compensation?
Okay, well, we have questions. We have questions coming in right now as people are getting involved in this conversation. There is a question from a viewer right now. They ask, how can people help expedite getting returning citizens registered before the registration deadline on October 5th? Both of you, any of you can take this.
I mean, there's no shortcut to it. There's two ways that a person can register here in the state of Florida. They can either register online, or they can actually fill out a voter registration form and turn it or mail it in to the supervisor of elections office.
Okay, very good.
And I think the thing that I would add to that is just, if you know someone who is eligible, who should be eligible, make sure that they know their rights. The best tool that we have to fight back against this voter suppression is just to make sure that folks know what the state of play is, and don't let them get confused by all of the misinformation and deliberate confusion that's being spread by folks who don't want people to vote.
Jawan, let me tell you, and I appreciate Micah saying this, but also Florida Rights Restoration Coalition has been working with public officials for over a year, right, to address this. And we've been working with the clerk of courts, state attorneys, public defenders. We have a cadre of private attorneys that have donated pro bono hours. And so if anyone has any kind of confusion, all they have to do is contact our office. We have a 1-877-MY-VOTE toll-free number that they can call 24 hours a day. And they could also visit our website or go to our social media page and inquire. But we are willing, and we have personnel that's been working for over a year that's ready to help anyone figure out whether or not they're qualified to register to vote.
Okay, now I'm going to kind of take a little detour here, and then we're going to come back. But the detour here is to talk about you, Desmond. Talk a little bit about how you got to this point. You're a former felon. You changed your life around. You're recently on 60 Minutes. You talked about how you wanted to end your life. You talked about sitting there, standing in the middle of the railroad tracks, waiting for a train to come by and take your life. But the train never showed up. And then from that point on, turning your life around back in 2005, going on to get your law degree from FIU, going on to do incredible things in your life, and then eventually being able to vote. Matter of fact, you were featured in Time magazine, I believe, as well.
Yep.
But you haven't been pardoned yet by the state. Well, recently, you had that opportunity. Governor Ron DeSantis said, no, you haven't done enough to show that you deserve a pardon. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let me tell you, that experience, you know, and I want to set the record straight. What he said was, let me think some more about it, really. He delayed the action. He did not say yes. And I believe that justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied. But what that experience in front of the governor really goes to show is the reason why we started Amendment 4 in the first place. When you have 4 politicians that have the power to decide which American citizen get to vote and which American citizen don't get to vote, and that decision is a purely arbitrary decision, that's problematic because it allows partisan politics to play a role in deciding who gets to vote in this country, definitely in this state. And so we knew that we had to take that power out of the hands of politicians and create an alternative pathway that Floridians, when they're completed their sentence, are able to participate in our democracy without having to grovel at the feet of any politician. Because when I laid my life on the line, because clemency process is analyzing what have you done since your last mistake, right? And there have been nothing but a exemplary track record that I have laid out all the way to, you're right, Time 100. I've been named Floridian of the Year, Central Floridian of the Year. If that is not good enough for the governor and the cabinet to say yes, that I at the minimum deserve the restoration of my civil rights, then that's a sad state of affairs up there, because at the end of the day, who would qualify? Only people that they like?
Amen to that. And we've seen some that have been pardoned, I'm telling you, that didn't get anywhere near the accolades that you have been blessed to have received. And Mike, I want to come back now to you. Like I said, we're going to take a brief detour and we're going to come back to voting rights. Okay, so Mike, I have to talk to you. Now, you know, because you're with the ACLU, I want to ask you this. All right, recently, last week, Governor Ron DeSantis says that he wants protesters in Florida who throw things, cause property damage, or block traffic to be charged with felonies. It's all included in the package of proposals the governor unveiled this week. And also something that I think I saw in that as well was that drivers who were to run into protesters would not be possibly charged. I think I even saw that as well. And you can possibly correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I wanted to know your thoughts on that, being with the ACLU.
Sure. So, you know, the governor released this set of proposals last week that is just outrageous, disgraceful, ridiculous, vile. I don't think there are enough adjectives in the dictionary to describe just how disgusting this proposal was. And, you know, he talked a lot about the need for law and order, said that it was about public safety. And all of that is really just a front and a facade. It's based on a tissue of lies. It's pulled from discredited stories from the internet, memes that have been widely denied and discouraged and discredited. Really what it's about is about criminalizing protest, and especially silencing people who are standing up and saying Black Lives Matter. I think it's really a shame and a disgrace that at a time when we are trying to make progress on racial justice, when there are more folks than ever before who are willing to stand up and say that police, that law enforcement should be held accountable, that our system is racist, that there are serious problems of racial injustice that need to be addressed. The governor said, none of that matters. I'm not interested in solving that problem. I'm not even interested in being part of that conversation. Instead, the governor said he wanted to be part of a conversation where we criminalize protest, where we deny people's First Amendment rights, and where you silence people who are standing up to say Black Lives Matter. So much of this activity that we've seen over the summer of folks being outraged and saying that change has to come has been about saying that we should hold people accountable, and we should hold law enforcement officers in particular accountable when they do things that are wrong, when they do things that are criminal, when they do things that are brutal. And to that conversation, the governor's contribution was instead to try and make more people free from accountability and impunity. It was to say that more people would not be held accountable, including that truly reprehensible example that you mentioned of saying that folks who kill protesters with their cars will no longer be held liable or responsible if they just say that they were afraid. I think it was really a dark day for democracy, for the cause of racial justice, and for the state of Florida when that nonsensical and vile package was released last week. And I hope that it is the last that we ever see of it.
I was about to say, how do you plan to oppose it, though? I mean, what do you plan on doing, the ACLU?
So I think the one bit of good news here is that it won't come back until the spring. The legislature does not return until February and March of next year. Thank goodness. We've got some time. And so we have to sort of wait and see whether the governor was serious about this or whether it was just chest thumping. I hear there's an election coming. Someone told me there's an election in a few weeks. So there's at least a possibility that some of it is just posturing for that. But if he is serious about it, if it comes back and if the legislature adopts it, we're going to fight it tooth and nail in the halls of the Capitol and then in the halls of court and then in the streets of Florida if it comes to that.
Very well said. Okay. Well, Desmond, I want to get back to you. Let's go back to voting rights because there's still a lot of questions out there. So if returning citizens have questions about eligibility, your advice for them?
To contact Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. We have a crew of attorneys. We have staff that are dedicated to addressing every issue that a returning citizen may have as it relates to eligibility to vote. And so they can reach out to us on social media. They could dial our 1-800 number 877-MY-VOTE-0. And they could also visit our website at FloridaRRC.com. And we have people at the ready waiting to assist anyone of the 774,000 to the 500,000 that don't even owe fines and fees, but may not even know it.
And can you tell me how many people you have registered? How many people are eligible since you began this process to vote in November?
Well, we already know around 500,000 to 600,000 people are eligible to vote. All right. And we know that there is over 85,000 people that are on the roster right now with prior felony convictions. We know that. And every single day, we're registering hundreds of returning citizens across the state of Florida. And we're going to continue to register them until Monday, which is the registration deadline. But that number is growing every day. And listen, at the end of the day, we've been talking to so many people, and they're not just coming by themselves when they get their voter ID card. They're bringing their family and they're bringing their friends. They're making this a celebration. Dewan, let me tell you, we was getting ready to register this young lady in Oslo, Florida. And as you know, she told us that right before we got there, that her doctor gave her 6 months to live. Right. And as she was filling out her registration form, she started crying and telling our canvassers how she'd been trying for over 24 years, right, to register to vote, but she didn't think that she would ever be able to vote because of a felony conviction and a drug addiction. Well, as she was signing her name on the dotted line, she looked up and she asked our canvasser to please pray that God would allow her to live long enough to cast a ballot. You know, the other week I called to check up on her and I received word that her health had turned for the worse and they had to move her into a hospice. And 3 to 4 days after they moved her in, she passed. Oh, and she died. And but that yearning and that desire to be a part of our democracy, that's real. And that's what drives us, because we know that there are people out there in our communities that just want to be a part of our democracy, want to be a part of this country, want to experience the same thing that I experienced when I walked into a voting booth for the first time in over 30 years, right? And that's an experience that takes us to a whole nother level, understanding the value, right, and the sacredness of our vote. And there are people out there that's yearning, and we're going to keep on fighting. We're going to keep on pushing forward. And let me tell you, as a person who has been homeless, addicted to crack, who has stood in front of railroad tracks, right, who have been to prison, I don't scare easy. And so the state can do whatever it wants. But one thing it will not do, it will not stop our efforts to make sure that every one of the 1.4 million Floridians who should be benefiting from Amendment 4 enjoy that opportunity to do so.
Amen. And Mike, I got to ask you, is as far as those that do go to the polls, they do try to vote. You heard it there. The suppression is real. You said it. The suppression is real, to suppress your vote, to make sure that your vote doesn't count. What do you have to say to those that are fearful about going to the polls and voting? What do you have to say to them?
So I would say, do not be afraid. Don't let them intimidate you. Don't let them frighten you. Don't let them confuse you. Don't let them take away your power. That's what they want, is to take away your power. That's because you have something that is powerful, that is cherished, that is, as Desmond just said, sacred. And the only way that they can access that is by you giving it up to them in this particular situation. And we're not going to do that. So folks should know that they can go and be unafraid, that there are folks in this movement, the ACLU, FRRC, the NAACP, dozens of organizations are out there who have their back. We're there for you to make sure that you are allowed to go and exercise your right to vote, your sacred right to vote. We're there for you. We've got your back. And don't let them take away your power. That's what they want. That's what the folks who are doing their best to suppress voters all over the state want. And we're not going to let them do it. It took us 150 years to pass Amendment 4. We're certainly not going to let it take 150 years for 1.4 million people to be registered. And we're certainly not going to let it take another 150 years to make sure that every single eligible person in this state has the right to vote and has their vote count.
And Micah, how do you plan on voting? Do you plan on voting in person?
I voted by mail early today. I filled out my ballot this morning and put it in the post office box right away. It came one day. I put it in the mail the very same day because I knew who I was voting for. So I put it in the mail to make sure that it got in early, and we would encourage everyone to do the same. Vote however is convenient for you, whether it's in person early. If you do it by mail, do it as soon as possible. Or if you go in person, do it safely. But just go and vote and use your power.
And I have to ask you the same question, Desmond. How do you plan on voting?
Wow, I'm glad you asked that, Jawan. Let me tell you, I plan on celebrating, right? Because let me tell you, participating in democracy is something that we should celebrate. It should be something that you aspire to do and not feel that you have to do. And so on October 24th, across the state of Florida, FRC is holding voting celebrations for so many. Man, listen, we got people getting voter registration cards that's 51, 53, 59 years old and never voted in their life, right? Every day we got a returning citizen that's getting registered and getting their voter identification card. So that means every day there's a reason to celebrate because our democracy is becoming more and more inclusive. So we're going to party like a rock star on the 24th. Listen, we're going to bring down as many people as we can, influencers, celebrities. We're going to have the bikers out there. We are going to celebrate because that's what democracy is about. When you're seeing these people who've never voted before, or people like me who haven't voted in over 30 years, this is my first presidential, man. Man, I'm not going to act like it's something that's just casual. Man, this is historic for so many folks. And the thing about it is that the very same people that was told that they didn't amount to anything, the very same people that make even the news people call us felons, right? Even though we're returning citizens, to use that word to dehumanize us so that when the atrocities is brought upon us, people are less likely to be apathetic because we're a felon, right? And that's why they use that word, right? But the very same system and the people that told us that our voice didn't matter, they now have to deal with us because Amendment 4 made us have us give us the power and the right to vote. And now we cover the gap, right? Let me be very clear. The very same people that was told that they didn't have a voice now covers the gap and can determine the direction that this country is going. And they will determine that because we cover the gap. and we got the juice. And we're going to celebrate that. Our vote, our time right now. And we're going to do it. October 24th. I can't wait. I'm telling you.
You got me pumped up, brother.
And
I'm
I
ready
hope
to
to
go
see you
right
out there.
now. Let's go. I'm ready to go do it now.
We ready to, and we bringing the family, we bringing the community with us.
I love
and we're gonna show the people that's trying to stop us that we understand our vote is valuable, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't be trying so hard to stop us from doing it. And so let me tell you, COVID-19, we got to practice social distancing. But let me tell you something, Juwan. COVID-19 don't have nothing on what our ancestors had to go through. We had to fight. They had to fight through state-sanctioned violence, where they were murdered, hung on trees, burned, bitten by dogs, sprayed with fire hoses. In this age, we can register to vote in the comfort of our own home. We can even vote by mail. And so if our ancestors could have gone through what they went through, man, we by any means necessary, we're showing up, because we're going to be the difference makers. Now you watch, we're going to show up. Returning citizens around the state of Florida, from the Panhandle all the way down to the Keys. We got chapters in so many counties, and we're organizing these voting parties. October 24th, come and celebrate with us, because this is really what democracy is about.
Amen, brother. Very well said, Desmond. As one of my heroes would say, John Lewis, he's saying you're getting in good trouble. And that's what you've been doing.
Yep.
All right. I really appreciate you, Desmond Meade and Micah Kubik. Thank you so much for joining us for this all-important conversation. And we want to make sure you out there, you know that we always provide you with resources here on Voices. Well, we have all the resources you need. You can always click on NBC6.com. There you see right there. We want to make sure that you're informed and prepared before you cast your ballot for everything you need to know about the upcoming election, including local races, issues on the ballot, the latest on the presidential race, polling locations, and much more. Just search Decision 2020 at NBC6.com. You can follow us on Facebook right here on NBC6. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Juwan NBC6 as well. And Desmond, what is that site again? If they have any questions,
FloridaRRC.com. Hit us up. We here.
You are there. And as far Micah, ACLU, I have some questions. Somebody trying to threaten me at a polling location. They're looking at me crazy. They won't let me go in and vote. What do I do?
You can go to our website at www.aclufl.org, and we have resources there for folks to use, to be familiar, and to get in touch with us.
All right. I love it. I love it. Great information there, guys. Remember, everyone, education is the key to success. If you believe, you will achieve. Thank you so much for joining us on NBC6 Voices this week. I'm Juwan Strader. Make it a great evening.